My own repression when I was a teenager led me in a totally different direction because I could not say I loved Buddy. I became fascinated, fixated by the Black Civil Rights Movement, which was then called the Negro Civil Rights Movement. You understand what I'm telling you? That it allowed me, in some sense, repression allowed me to move to somebody else, to talk about somebody else's suffering, to be held by the images on the Huntley-Brinkley report of people being mowed down with a fire hose on the streets of Birmingham or Selma, the humiliation of a girl walking to Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. It was not so bad to be given so much history because I could not say I love Buddy. And then on the night of the junior prom, I did not go to the junior prom. I saved some young woman from the hazard and the ordeal of having to wear the orchid corsage. I went instead to hear Malcolm X. Malcolm X had come to Sacramento. I was interested in Malcolm X because he sounded not at all like Martin Luther King Jr. And I wanted to know what that voice was. What I did not know at the time, I told my mother I was going to the movies. 16 years old, took the bus across town, and went to this hall. I didn't know at the time that Malcolm restricted his audiences to blacks. And I stood at that door, 16 years old, and there were two men, one on each side of the door. One looked like Sonny Liston, the other looked like Mike Tyson. And they looked at me, and I could see the computation behind their eyes. What do we do with the Mexican kid? They let me in. African Americans have always been letting me in. I want to say this carefully too, because I don't want it subject to laughter, but most of the priests, and not a few of the sisters, the nuns I know, in 2009, are gay. And they have observed, not in monastic sense, they have observed long silences in their lives. And sometimes I find it extremely moving that these people who could not find a way to say to another human being, I love you, have found a way to minister to an entire congregation while the rest of us sleep on a Sunday morning. The problem you know. The scandal you know. This story of sexual repression turned into almost a kind of comic tragedy. Men who had entered minor seminaries at the age of 12 seemed to be locked in a sexual imagination of a 12-year-old, chasing in the rectory after another 12-year-old, belly rubbing, almost pre-sexual. I write for a Catholic magazine, The Tablet, in London, and somebody gave me a copy of the report that was recently issued in Ireland. 2,400 pages, 6 decades of the Irish Catholic Church, mentioning in particular the two orders that educated me in America, the Christian Brothers, James Joyce's order, and the Sisters of Mercy. And what a story it is. Sadism on a Dickensian level. A working class church turning against the very poorest of its members, the orphans, turning those orphans into workhouse slaves. I thought the weekend after that report was published that somebody in my parish would pray for those children in Ireland, those generations, would at least mention something about those children. Nothing. Nothing. One of the stories that I've been working on unofficially for this book that never gets finished, somebody asked me today as we were coming in, are you still working on that monotheism book? Sounding a great deal like my editor. I want to know about these men who ended up in jail, these priests. One of them I know, who's in his 70s, and who has found his priesthood behind bars. There he is in prison, broken, truly a priest, ministering to these other criminals a third of his age with their tattoos that come up to their necks, praying with them. And I think to myself, what a fine Catholic story that would make for Graham Greene. But what a fine irony, don't you think? Prop 8, passing in California, largely because of the efforts of the Mormon Church. One man, one woman. And the Catholic prelates, who have a preference, one suspects, for velvets and silks. Preaching after this calamity of sexual abuse, preaching religious sexual orthodoxy. Where is Mark Twain when we need him? The accusation against the feminists in the 19th century was that she was unnatural. I am unnatural. I think to myself now that I live in the century, in the decade at least, of Ann Dunham, Barack Obama's mother. Everybody goes on and on about Barack Obama. It is Ann Dunham I think about. She married Kenya, daughter of Kansas. And then their marriage failed. He was brave in marrying Kansas, but the moment the marriage fails, he goes back to the known world. He goes back to Kenya. She doesn't go back to Kansas, she goes to Indonesia. She marries Indonesia. Barack Obama said in an interview in Time magazine that his mother was reckless. I want to be reckless. I want to marry Indonesia and Kenya. The story of our time right now is a sexual story, and it is not simply a gay story. It is a story of women living without men. The majority of American women now live without men. 40% of women now are raising children without a man. 40%, it is even higher in England, even higher in Scandinavia. It was telling when Mark Phillips, is that his name, the swimmer, was winning, Phelps, was winning medal number 6 or 7 or whatever it was. Always his eyes looking for his mother. And did we even bother to notice that no one spoke of the father?